Welcome to the Kiwimana Buzz.
Hello everyone, this is Gary and this is the Kiwimana Buzz, a beekeeping podcast broadcasting from the Waitakere Ranges in Auckland, New Zealand. And this is episode number 48, a special interview with a rooftop beekeeper called Megan Paska, who's just written a new book. And hi, I'm Gary, and we normally do this with my co-host Margaret, but flying solo tonight. Our podcast is about beekeeping, gardening, and life. And this was a great interview with Megan that we did a few weeks back. And she's a fantastic lady, and she's just started a new farm. And you'll hear all about that, about the new goats, and you'll hear about her treatment-free beekeeping. And the show notes for this podcast, guys, is kiwimana.co.nz/48. And it's hard to believe that we've been podcasting now for 2 whole years. Our anniversary was on the 16th of May. So 2 years, it's pretty amazing, isn't it? So I just want to say thanks to all you guys that are listening to us, and it's really fantastic to see all the different countries downloading us, and so it's really great. So thanks to everyone out there. We really appreciate it. And coming up in a couple of weeks, we have an interview with Michael Bush. He's a beekeeper from Nebraska, so listen out for that. But let's get into the interview with Megan Paska. Well, Megan is a beekeeper and a farmer, and she's the author of the new book, The Rooftop Beekeper. And she's recently moved from Brooklyn to set up a new farming project in Rumson, New Jersey. So we've given the Kiwimana audience a little overview there, Megan, but take it from here and tell us who you are and what you do.
Well, I'm a former urban beekeeper who kind of got the bug for all facets of agriculture. Honeybees, as we all know, sort of contribute on a pretty large scale to agriculture, whether it be small scale or big ag. So I felt like bees fit really well into the equation. I had always sort of envisioned myself as working outside, working for myself, working with food. So I think the next logical step from being an urban beekeeper was to be an actual farmer. So I moved just outside of the city to start my own small-scale diversified CSA farm.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So you supply vegetables to the members of that group, don't you?
Yes, yeah. It's a really small CSA, so we only have 25 members, and so which is nice. It's just a little bit of a supplement to our income, but then we also sell to restaurants in the area.
Oh, nice. And a CSA, is that like a co-op kind of thing, isn't it?
Yeah, it stands for Community Supported Agriculture, and basically it's a way for community members to help support a farmer when their need is at its greatest. So it's like a subscription service, really. People will pay up front for weekly shares of that farmer's harvests throughout the season.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, we have some of our bees up the road and they provide pollination to an organic farm's vegetables.
Great.
Yeah, it's something that really hasn't taken off in New Zealand yet. So is that quite a big thing in America?
Yeah, it's a really big thing. I mean, so much so that people who like farmers that don't traditionally just do like vegetable crops have been starting to do CSAs. So there's like cheese CSAs and honey CSAs and cut flower CSAs and I think the oddest one that I found, which I thought was actually really wonderful, was a natural dyes CSA. So people were growing different, natural dye crops so people could dye fibers like yarn and wool and fleece and things like that. So I thought that was a pretty creative sort of take on the CSA model.
Oh, that's fantastic. So that's kind of how you got started in beekeeping, from sort of like the farming aspects?
Well, it actually sort of happened in reverse. I was really into gardening, but, I had a very small garden, and I sort of had a traumatic first experience with bees as a child, and I got stung pretty badly on my legs and feet, and because of that, I actually had sort of a heightened awareness of them. I was more aware when they were around, but I was also more aware when they weren't around. So my garden I noticed that I just didn't see honeybees around as often as I used to, and I knew that they were essential to, to pollination. So when I finally met a beekeeper at a homebrewers association meeting, I sort of started asking him about his hobby, and I asked with a lot of sort of vigor, and he started to get a little bit tired of my questioning, and he suggested that I just, take a beekeeping course and learn all about it. So I did. I signed up for a short course in Maryland, and I visited a couple of beekeepers and watched them work, and I decided that it was something I wanted to do. But then I got offered a job in New York City, and it was a job I couldn't really sort of refuse. So I moved to the city with the hopes that one day I'd be able to be a beekeeper. It just wasn't my time. And then I was actually getting lunch at a supermarket around the corner from where I was working, and I saw a magazine that I picked up, and there was a full-page spread on people breaking the law to keep bees in New York City, and I decided that I wanted to break the law too, and so I took the magazine
in a good
home
way.
to my landlords,
yeah,
and showed it to my landlords, and I was like, "Look, I've taken a course in beekeeping. Like, I know beekeepers. I've seen hives at work." And I really want to do this. Like, what do you guys think? And they were like, we really like honey. We think this is cool. Let's do it. Which is really weird. I mean, it's honestly really weird that I had landlords that were really into the idea of me putting bees on the roof. But it was very fortunate that they were. So we put bees on the roof. And a couple friends of mine started talking about it and taking pictures and posting on Facebook. And then next thing I knew, I had people from National Geographic and New York Magazine and New York Times calling me to come over and see what the hives were about. And then that led to teaching opportunities. It was just weird. I mean, people, I guess there are people in the world who knew a lot less than I did about beekeeping, so they thought that I was a real expert. But I didn't know anything. But people were they wanted to learn the basics of beekeeping, and I was like, well, I know the basics, so I guess I can talk to that sort of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, as long as you know more than the students, you're okay. That's how you gotta think about it.
So I started teaching in the city. I started teaching about 6 years ago. Just intro to urban beekeeping at the New York Botanical Gardens and at my own farm, or actually I was teaching it on my rooftop in Brooklyn too. I was taking any opportunity to kind of share what I had learned. So
absolutely, Megan. I'm sure rooftop beekeeping provides you some really unique challenges. So how do you get boxes up on the roof?
I think that in a lot of ways it's easier. I very rarely had any issues with things like hive beetles, and there were never any sort of fungal brood diseases that I had to sort of deal with because everything dried out really quickly up on the roofs. There wasn't a lot of condensation buildup. Getting things up on the rooftop was definitely challenging. You definitely gain some pretty significant upper body strength, and teetering on a ladder with a 40-pound super on top of your head is not something that many people sort of look forward to when they become a beekeeper. But you make it work. When you really want to do it, you just make it work.
Yeah.
I definitely there are days that I wish that I still had a bunch of hives on a Brooklyn rooftop somewhere, but it's can't really do that anymore because I'm so busy with this farm here. It's
yeah, it's a travel as well, isn't it, to get there and stuff? Yeah. I guess
we had to move my hives from these rooftops, and so these were hives that had been living on a rooftop for 4 or 5 years, and we had to strap them all up and just seal them off and then carry them down a ladder, a straight ladder, going through a hatch in the roof and through a building. And I mean, it's definitely logistically there are some issues with it, but if you're smart and thorough, there are ways around those sort of logistical kind of troubles.
Yeah. And so when you were growing up in Maryland, did you live in a rural community?
Well, I actually grew up in Baltimore, which is a city, But my family's from outside of Maryland. They're from Virginia, in a very rural place outside of Lynchburg, Virginia. And my family had they still have a 450 acre farm there, and they grew commodity crops like corn and tobacco and different like sort of feed grains and things like that. And so in the summertime when I got out of school, my mother would take us down to Virginia and we would stay there for a few weeks. And I just remember the first few times we went, I loved it so much. I loved walking through the meadows and sleeping at night in complete silence, save for a few crickets. It really left a huge impression on me, and I just kind of knew that I wanted my life in some form as an adult to sort of take that shape. And so yeah, I got the chance as a city kid to have one foot in the country from time to time, and it was completely transformative.
Yeah, it is magic, living in the country. Cause, I know I had experience because we live in the middle of nowhere, and we moved to London for a bit, and it was just so different. Constant
I
noise.
Love the city. And people would always ask me why I was raising chickens in the city and keeping bees when I could just live in the country. Like, why was I trying to like fit a square peg into a round hole? And I was, I love the city, and I love the culture, and I love the people. I mean, everything about it was just, it was just a wonderful experience being in New York City for 8 years. It did so many great things for me, but I definitely missed having some personal space and having a more sort of intimate relationship with like the natural world. So, it was my time to leave. I'm fortunate in that I'm only an hour away from New York City, so I'm still very close. I can actually take public transportation to get to the city very easily. So whenever I need my fix of horrible smells and loud people, like it's not too far off.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I mean, at least you're far enough away to be away from it, but you're close enough if you need to visit again. Yeah, so what's the main type of hive you keep? I've
kept a few top bar hives. I have a really hard time getting top bar hives to overwinter here. My friend Sam Comfort from Anarchy Apiaries seems to be kind of a master at getting top bar hives to overwinter, but I haven't really gotten him here to sort of help me out with that. But I keep Langstroth hives, mostly foundationless Langstroth hives. So instead of using a printed, like a crimped wire foundation, I use just wax starter strips, and I let the bees build natural comb.
Oh, okay. Do you like a small one, like about an inch long high or something?
Yeah. Sometimes I'll just jam a piece of cardboard or a popsicle stick, like maybe an inch and a half in like width in there, and I'll brush it with beeswax, and then I'll just let the bees do their thing. And since I do all mediums or Illinois supers, so I don't use deep boxes. I like all the frames to be uniform, so if I need to expand the brood nest at all, I can kind of shuffle frames around pretty easily from like upper to lower levels.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
But medium frames, because like once the wax cures for a couple of weeks, it can be put into a centrifuge. I don't use I use a hand crank centrifuge to extract honey, and sometimes I do cut comb, which makes it really easy when you're foundationless. So that's kind of what my setup's sort of like.
Oh, okay, that sounds good. Yeah, we spoke to recently Linda Tillman, and she also uses medium boxes. I think it makes a lot of sense, eh?
Yeah,
and
definitely. From the management standpoint, it just like having everything standardized and uniform just makes it really easy to move things around without having to worry about the frames being incompatible,
Yeah, absolutely. And I imagine, especially if you're a rooftop beekeeper.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Picking up a heavy deep too as a woman, not that women can't pick up deep boxes, but you're picking up a deep full of brood and honey and bees, and it's like 70, 80 pounds sometimes on top of a really hot, sweltering rooftop. You're just you just don't want to be making. I'm scared to death also of just picking up one of the deeps and then dropping it and breaking my foot or making the bees really angry. So mediums are just easier for me to move around in general. They're easier to manage.
Yeah, absolutely. So what excites you, Megan, about beekeeping?
That's a difficult question to answer because it's really all of it. I mean, part of it is that it's a huge community where no one bee will survive on its own, but they all contribute to a greater whole. They all have something to contribute. I think on just a tactile level, I think that bees are like really sensual. You open up the hive and it just all the smells and the sounds are just really like from an purely animal, like an animalistic standpoint, are really just like lovely. I like all of the things that come from the hive. I think it's really amazing that honeybees, like everything that comes from a hive, can be used to heal or to provide nutrition, not only to the bees, but to people and animals. So, wax, propolis, venom, pollen, all of it. It's all, it all has the potential to be nutritive. I don't know. I think bees are just really great. I think that they're perfect. And it's nice I think that everything is perfect. I think all animals and all beings have the potential for perfection, but I think that bees have not deviated much from it. And you can at a glance see it very clearly. And I just love them. I just think they're so great.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they, they're perfect, and why change? It's worked for them for 10 million years, isn't it? So
yeah,
it's interesting. I saw recently they found an old bee in like it was like in a tree sap, and it was from about I think it was 9 million years ago, and it did look a lot different. They have changed a bit,
yeah.
But, they've adapted with all the flowers, so it's awesome. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to do a bit of time travelling on the Kiwimana Buzz, and we're going to go back to a time when the young Megan wasn't a beekeeper. What's one thing you would say to that young Megan now?
Yeah, I think I probably would have gone back to myself as a child right after I had gotten stung really badly, and my foot was both of my feet were just like swollen and throbbing, and I was really hysterical. And for years afterwards, I was frightened of bees. And I would just say, don't be mad at them. It's not their fault. Like I would probably let my little self know that sooner or later I'd be working with the bees and we'd have a good, like, cooperative relationship. Oh. So that maybe I would have gotten started much earlier. Sometimes I wish that I had gotten started back in Baltimore so that I had even more experience under my belt, because I love learning.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a great profession to be in if you love learning, isn't it? Because, I tell people all the time, you never stop learning, and if you never met a beekeeper that knows everything,
No, you certainly have. I've met plenty of beekeepers who think they know everything.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And they love to talk about it, but it's rare that I've ever met someone who actually knows everything.
No, I think it's impossible. I mean,
yeah.
I think the more you know, the less you know. And
I agree.
Oh no, that's great. So I mean, you did really well to get over your fear of bees, didn't you? When you were a child. So was the first time you kept bees quite traumatic?
No, I remember the first time I hived a package. I was really terrified, but I wasn't terrified of the bees. I was terrified of messing up.
Oh, okay.
I come from a long line of very stubborn women who, like, when they're afraid, they'll never let on. Like, they're just like, all right, I'm going to do it. And then, like, so I have a little bit of that in me. And I just knew that, like, I wanted to do it. And, like, I wasn't going to be afraid of it. And that was that. That being said, I also really hate failing at anything. And so I just didn't want to do it. I didn't want to do it wrong. And I also didn't want, like, my neighbors to be completely incensed over the notion that there were boxes of flying venomous insects on the rooftop. So those two things together just kind of made me really like anxious.
Yeah.
But the moment those bees were in that hive that I painted in my cramped Brooklyn kitchen, like I just knew. I was like, this is what I need to be doing. Like, this is it. Like, I love this. So every day after work, I would just take some beers up to the roof and just crack some beers and sit in front of the hive and just watch them. And it never got old. It was really great. It was like kind of medicine for me too, because I'm a really anxious person by nature, and my mind's constantly like jumping from thought to thought. And it's the one thing that without fail I can do, and like my mind just like stops. Like it just stops doing all that random thinking, and like I'm able just to be like very much in the moment. It's like totally one of those Zen sort of hobbies. I don't like to call it a hobby because I think it kind of like diminishes its value, but it's a very Zen-like sort of facet to my life. And I definitely feel like without it, I'm not, I'm a lesser human.
Yeah.
You know, I feel like elevated by it.
Oh, absolutely. I think it's one of those things that you have to be present. You know, that's the thing. You have to be present. Otherwise, the bees will tell you. And, you know, and it is a Zen-like thing. And I think that's one of the most fascinating things in the world is sitting in front of your beehive and watching what's happening. You know, and you can also tell a lot from that too. You can see what's coming in, what's going out, and, you know, the behavior of the bees. And that's fantastic. I totally agree with that.
Well, it's what's great is what you don't anticipate is that you think that you're going to learn a lot about the bees by being a beekeeper, but you end up learning a lot about your environment too. Like you learn about bloom times, and you can sort of tell what's going on in the world outside based on what's going on inside of the hive. So it's weird. It actually forces you to be connected beyond just like this one sort of thing. So you're focused on the bees, but by proxy you've become connected to all of these other really amazing sort of phenomenon. So that's another thing that I like about bees. I'll keep throwing more of these in as the conversation progresses, but I could write a list as long as my arm of all the things that I like about bees and beekeeping.
Oh, no, that's fantastic. No, that's great. And so what do you think's the biggest issue facing beekeeping in your area?
In my area, honestly, I think that this insistence on continuing to get packaged bees from the South is kind of troubling. You know, it's like I understand it's a really convenient and easy way to get bees brought up here, but, you know, most of the bees that are coming up here, they just are not adapted to the climate up here and the forage up here, and I think it stresses them out to be forced to exist in a place with more extreme weather, and I just wish that more people... It's just tough because it's like there's such a huge demand for bees in the United States, and the only way that anyone can sort of meet that demand is to produce them in places like Georgia and Florida and stuff like that. And it's kind of bad. I think honestly that's the thing that troubles me the most. And this is not to say that I am like completely against packaged operations, but I think that maybe people get really eager to expand, or they don't try to sort of seek out people more locally because they don't know any different. But I think it would be really nice to see more people maybe getting into breeding locally, or using local genetics, supporting beekeepers locally, and trying to initiate more breeding programs in their local community so that they can, get a little closer to having bees that are adapted to their climate, their circumstances. A lot of people will say, migratory pollination is like really troubling as well. But, migratory pollination is just, migratory pollination exists because our current agricultural system like requires it. And I think that if we change that, then, beekeepers can go back to treating their bees the way that they want to be treating them. I don't think that any of these contract beekeepers want to be, putting their bees down in places in groves and orchards where they're spraying all kinds of nasty stuff. They want to do what they love, but also make a living. So there's, I don't know. I don't know if I answered the question, but...
Oh, no, that sounds great. I mean, that sounds like a really good business opportunity for someone in your local area to produce local bees, because local bees are adapted to your area, and that's a great idea. So good luck. Yeah, we don't have packaged bees in New Zealand. It seems to be a Pacific American thing for some reason.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't have... This is what I've heard. They don't have a lot of success with them. They often abscond.
Yeah. I mean, most of the time, people usually get Italian bees in packages, and they tend to, especially here where the winters can be a little bit colder, Italian bees tend to not be very frugal about their eating over the winter. Like Russian bees can be a little more sort of thrifty, but Italian bees will just brood and eat through their food like really, really quickly. So a lot of times they just starve through the winter, or or they just freeze. They're not like, they don't cluster quite as tightly as some of the Russian bees do. So genetics definitely come into play. How do you guys usually do you just catch swarms and get like nucleus hives, or?
Yeah, most people just either buy fully working hives or nukes. Yeah, we don't actually have any packages.
Yeah, we if I had it my way, I would only get bees by catching swarms. I love catching swarms. I think they're so fun, and swarms are great. They're the best way to get bees. There's a natural way to get bees. So if I could do it that way, I would be thrilled just to have an entire apiary of like caught bees.
Yeah, absolutely, and especially ones from near wild areas, because you might get some genetics of some wild bees that have been adapted to that area.
I agree.
Oh yeah, you have to get some swarm lures up.
Yeah, I caught a couple swarms last year. And that was fun because they landed in an apple tree just 8 feet up. So
that's easy.
Super easy to catch them. I've tried to catch a couple swarms in New York City, and of course they would go 50 feet up into a tree or on the side of a building or down on a busy street somewhere where everyone would just panic. They weren't my swarms. I just get phone calls and I'd come and help out. Yeah, it's much easier to catch them here.
I know on our podcast we often talk about the media reports of swarms, and some of the media reports are quite hilarious. It almost sounds like the end of the world. Yeah,
people get a little hysterical over it.
Yeah, I think movies like The Swarm and things like that from the 70s didn't help, did they?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So what's the biggest mistake you see a lot of beekeepers making today?
Oh, I don't know. I try not to get in the habit of calling out people's mistakes, mostly just because I feel like it's a pervasive habit of most beekeepers. And it honestly, I think it just keeps people from talking very honestly about their sort of management techniques. I think that, I don't know, I have to say that I think there's a lot of weird, intense male ego in the beekeeping world, and that's really sad because I just, I think that it would be really awesome if beekeepers could just sort of function in a community where it was just really open and it was like based on sort of sharing and then like in perfecting our craft, So, there are people who do things a lot differently than I do. And I think that's great. I love to see how people do things and learn from it and compare it to the way that I do things, because it also sometimes sheds a light on things that maybe I do that might not work so well in the future. So I don't know. All I can do is try to become a better beekeeper for myself and try to inspire other people to be good beekeepers in their own way. And I don't know. I don't feel comfortable like blasting anyone for doing anything differently than I do.
Oh no, that's fine. Yeah, that's fine. And so what's the great thing about teaching your students about beekeeping? I mean, you must obviously hear some great stories.
Well, I think what's really cool is that you get asked questions that you never really thought of. So you get a different perspective on the matter, and someone asks you a question, and you're like, wow, I never thought about that, and I don't know the answer to that. So it forces you to, think about it. And it's always great to think. And it also makes you like hungry for more information. So you can go out and you can talk to other beekeepers about it, find out what they have experienced, and then you become a better beekeeper for it. You're more knowledgeable. And that's great. I love that. And then, I also love it when like beekeepers who have taken my courses go out and start beekeeping, and then they contact me and they contact me and they're like, oh my God, I don't know what to do. And then I tell them what to do, and then it works and they're really pleased. And then that makes me feel good as as a beekeeper. I feel like my skill is worth something. But then it's also just really awesome when you see a beekeeper that came through your class and they're just like doing really well with it and they're really loving it, and it's like really enriched their life. So, that's my answer.
Yeah, no, that's true. I mean, there's nothing like learning stuff by teaching it, eh? You can actually, you definitely
meet
learn
the
stuff.
people too.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's one good thing about beekeeping, about meeting people, is you meet all different people, different jobs, different people, different philosophies. I think it's one of those things that does actually appeal to a lot of different people.
Definitely.
So it's awesome. And so we talked before about you're totally treatment free, but do you have any pests that affect your bees at all?
Well, I have. I've never had hive beetle problems before, but I moved here to New Jersey and now we've got small hive beetles. And so they definitely will affect weaker hives more. So I've had to start putting like hive beetle traps in, but they're completely passive. There's no chemicals there. They're just a tiny little trap with oil in them. And so it doesn't affect the bees at all. It just kind of keeps the population down. Varroa mites, honestly, I've never... I used to fuss about varroa mites, and then I started spending time talking to a lot of treatment-free beekeepers, and I would see their bees that they obviously don't treat, and they just let them build natural comb, and they don't trouble themselves with varroa. So I decided that I was just not going to trouble myself with varroa, and gradually over time I would see that certain hives really just had an innate ability to just sort of manage all of that on their own, especially if they were given the opportunity to build slightly smaller cell size for both the workers and the drones. But then most of the worker population would be spared getting chewed up by the mites, because the varroa would give sort of preferential treatment to the drone larva.
Oh,
so,
yeah, I do.
Yeah, so it seemed to really, the varroa are still there. I mean, people ask me if I do mite counts, and I'm like, well, no, I don't do mite counts, because, what difference would it make? I mean, honestly, there are mites in my hives. There are definitely mites in the hives, but there are fewer of them because there are lots of worker bees pulling those. I mean, I watch them pulling drones out all the time and removing them during the higher, later in the season when there's lots of higher drone population going into the winter. So honestly, yeah, I don't treat. I want my bees to be able to thrive on their own. And if I have to keep bees and put a bunch of chemicals in the hive, then I don't want to do it. I won't be a beekeeper if that's what it is required. I feel like for me, it's wrong. It clashes with the way I live my life, and I can't personally bring myself to do it. So I do everything that I can to give my bees an opportunity to adapt to the conditions that they are finding themselves in. And it seems to be working out pretty well.
Oh, that's awesome. So do you basically like breed from all the surviving hives? Is that what you do? Or
Yeah.
yeah. Oh, that sounds great.
Yeah, I usually like make splits and stuff off of the hives and then just I usually just let them rear their own queen. I feed them some honey from some of the stronger hives and some bee bread and just let them kind of make their own queens. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, and that's nature.
Yeah, well, this is it. I think, to be honest, treating them is it's just delaying the inevitable, isn't it? In a lot of ways.
Yeah, so, I agree. I mean, over time, bees, like all living things, adapt to pressures like this. It's natural selection. I mean, it's existed since the beginning of time, and so I think that human beings think that they're so clever and they just want to like outsmart nature all the time, and it's gotten us into a lot of problems, and so I don't want to live my life like that, trying to be clever.
Yeah, we're trying to keep sort of hives alive that are going to die anyway, aren't they? I guess.
Yeah,
that's the thing. Oh no, that's fantastic. And so you can maybe talk a bit about you've got a new book out called The Rooftop Beekeper. So what's that about, and what does that contain?
Well, it's a scrappy guide to keeping urban honeybees. So there are obviously a lot of really great books on the market on beekeeping and a few on urban beekeeping, and I have a lot of them, and I flipped through them a lot, and I wanted to produce a book that I think mirrored like the way that I teach classes, and that I think traditionally, at least in the United States, a lot of the short courses they're usually like 12-hour courses, and they offer so much information. And practically, like when I think back to my experience as a new beekeeper, I felt like it was so much information that there was no way that I could have really parsed through any of it. And then I find myself as a beekeeper encountering these problems and not really knowing what to do because I was just completely overwhelmed. So I wanted to produce a book that is simple and straightforward and approachable, and not clubbing people over the head with a ton of information, because that information is out there, and I just wanted people to have a really clean, simple foundation to start with. So, and it's obviously focused around urban beekeeping and sort of the logistical problems and solutions, associated with that, keeping bees in the city, not necessarily on a rooftop, but like anywhere where there are lots of people close by. So that's a big part of it too. And then there's some recipes and stuff like that in it.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, it sounds really good, because I don't think there's a book like that, is there? That specifically does urban beekeeping that I've seen. Not
that I'm aware of. I know that there should be a book coming out soon from another publisher. But I think it's a little different. I don't think that it takes. I think that my perspective on it is unique in that, like, I was strictly an urban beekeeper. Like, that was my experience, and I had a couple of hives up in the Catskills to like upstate New York, but most of all of my experiences were in the city, and I had many from like I was keeping bees for restaurateurs and for urban farms in the city. So I was fortunate in that I had the ability to work hives in a bunch of different urban settings. And so you learn a lot from that. You can compare and contrast when you're working with that many hives in the city. So I know that some of the books that are out there, the urban beekeeping books, if there are, honestly, I don't know for sure if there are any, but the ones that I've heard that were being written by people who were, keeping bees in slightly more roomy settings. Not to disparage the book at all, but I think that I take a lot of pride in my experiences and how they're sort of reflected in the book. So I hope that anyone who's in a city and wants to keep bees will pick it up and give it a look.
Oh, absolutely. Definitely there'd be definitely different challenges for city beekeepers. So I think it's a great idea. So we'll put a link on those show notes, guys, for that, to have a look at that book and encourage everyone to buy it. It'd be awesome. And the show notes for this one is kiwimana.co.nz/48. And so what's your beekeeping plans for the next season, Megan?
I'm keeping it pretty simple this season. I love bees, and I know that it's easy to get carried away, and so I'm only really keeping a handful of hives on my farm. I'm really trying to master this sort of diversified farm model. I mean, we've got dairy goats, and we've got poultry, like egg-laying poultry, and rabbits, and I'm trying to get it all to work together really perfectly. So my bees are not, I'm not expanding my beekeeping operation in any capacity. I kind of like it where it is right now. I'd like at some point to get into some queen breeding, but I think that's probably going to have to wait for another season.
Yeah.
But right now it's all about getting the bees to kind of work in harmony with everything else that's going on here. Absolutely.
I mean, there definitely seems to be a market there for them. And so you've recently had some new goats, haven't you? And how are they doing today?
Well, one of our does just had some baby goats, and one was a little bit of a pipsqueak and was having trouble standing, so he's a bottle baby. He's actually sitting with me right now. So and then the other two are about to have babies any minute now. So it's exciting. It's my first time. It's my first kidding season, and so it was pretty wild to be like in the stall at 3 a.m. delivering kids by myself.
Yeah.
But it was amazing, and I'm really excited about it. So.
Oh, awesome! So are you going to produce milk from them? Are you?
Yeah. So our does were in milk up until just a few months ago. So and then we bred them, and so we were definitely getting milk from them last year, and we were making cheese and yogurt, and we make goat milk soaps and things like that. So yeah, we love their milk. It's amazing stuff.
Oh, that's great. So yeah, that's fantastic. You sell all that on Etsy, don't you?
Yeah, I've got a little Etsy shop, and we sell some beeswax candles, and we sell goat's milk soaps. So yeah, we've got. I do also a bee propolis tincture too. I call it Bee Magic. It's propolis, thyme, and rosemary, and it's like really great stuff for cuts and scrapes, any sort of like fungal sort of skin problems. And I take it when I'm coming down with a cold or the flu, and it kicks it right out of my system. It's great stuff.
Oh, it's fantastic. Do you ship just in America or around the world?
I think I just have it set for American shipment, but I can add a tab for shipment to New Zealand.
Absolutely, yeah. That sounds good. Yeah, I mean, well, our listeners come from all over the world, so it's
great.
Really,
well,
really
yeah,
diverse.
I could see how much it would cost to ship worldwide, and I'd be glad to send stuff.
Absolutely.
Anywhere.
And so, what's the best way for listeners to get in touch with you?
Listeners can email me at meganpaska@gmail.com, or you can check out my blog, which is megpaska.com, Farmer Meg's Digest. I do a lot of posting on Instagram too, so if you like looking at pictures, I'm constantly posting them on Instagram. My handle is Farmer Meg Paska.
Yeah.
Actually, no, it's Farmer Meg. Farmer Meg Paska is my Twitter handle.
Oh, okay.
I'm all over social media. I'm kind of addicted.
Yeah, as am I. No, there's some great photos here of the new goats, so check those out, guys, and we'll put some links in the show notes to all those social media resources. Well, thanks very much for coming on the show, Megan. It's been fantastic to talk to you. And
thanks for having me.
Yeah, we wish you all the luck with the book and the new project of the new farm.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Have a good week.
Yeah, you too. Will you stay on the line? I'll just close the show out. Well, thanks everyone for listening. We really appreciate you guys listening, and we really appreciate all your feedback you've been giving us. That's fantastic. So the show notes for this one will be kiwimana.co.nz/48, and we'll see you next week.